Dear chess friends, this is MVP bringing you the 7th chapter of my international chess Caro-Kann defense course. Now we will talk about the fantasy variation and the main move of knight c3. e4, c6, d4, d5, f3, e6, knight c3, knight f6. Here the main continuation is bishop f4a or bishop e3b. Let's talk about another white's option. The first option is bishop g5. It is played frequently, but it is a bad square for white's bishop, because if white plays bishop f4, then black can't play e5, and if white plays bishop e3, black can't play c5, and here black can easily play queen b6. The only downside of this move is that white can do a forced draw. If white plays queen d2, then the typical position from the previous chapter appears. Queen takes b2, rook b1, queen a3, bishop d3, knight b d7, e5, knight g8, knight g2, h6, bishop h4, knight e7. Black has an extra pawn, and white of course has some compensation, but it is not obvious at all. So the best continuation is a3, and black can play c5. We saw that idea already in the previous chapter, and here there is the draw that white can do. Knight a4, queen a5, knight c3, and I think that the black's best option is queen b6, just making draw. Of course white can play bishop takes f6, g takes f6, knight g2, knight c6, e takes d5, knight d4, queen a4, knight a4, excuse me, queen a5, knight ac3, queen b6, and it is a draw. Or if black wants to play more, e5 could be recommended with the unclear play. It was bishop g5 move. Now let's talk about queen d3. Queen d3 is a mistake because black can play b6 with the idea of bishop a6. Knight g2, bishop a6, queen e3, bishop e7, bishop d2, castles queen side, and c5. Black starts their attack on the queen side, and they have better position now. So I think that queen d3 is a bad move. The transposition into the French defense is e5, knight fd7, f4, c5, and after knight f3 it is called Boleslavsky variation. White also can play knight ce2, but I don't tell about the French defense in this video. If you want to have a complete opening repertoire, you must know about this variation something. But on my practice, it is a very rare possibility that white will choose the transposition in the French defense. And here comes the move knight g2. It's quite an interesting option because white wants to play bishop g5, queen d3, and castle queen side with an attack. But I found a very interesting move, d takes e4, and it's curious that I played one time in Blitz that move and just one game. If knight takes e4, knight takes e4, f takes e4, e5, d takes e5, queen a5, c3, queen e5, and it is very bad very good variation of the Pierce's defense with the third move c6, because black completed their development and have no problems at all. So f takes e4, but e5. It is an obvious move, but it leads to inequality. If bishop e3, then it is an endgame. It takes d4, bishop d4, knight takes d4 is not very good due to bishop b4, and the pin is bad for white. So bishop d4, bishop e7, queen d3, c5, and the position is equal. If white plays d takes e5, then queen d1, knight d1. Of course, king d1 shouldn't be played due to knight g4, and if knight takes d1, then knight takes e4. Black wants to play bishop c5, and the position is more or less equal. So bishop g5 is the main idea, and here comes e takes d4, slightly shocking move. Black need to know the variation of e5. It was my game in blitz, h6, bishop h4, d takes e3, queen takes d8, king takes d8, e takes f5, g5, castle is queenside, knight d7, bishop g3, c takes b2, king takes b2, and shockingly black plays king e8, and the f6 pawn falls. And black now has two extra pawns. They will lose one of them, but it is a better endgame after the moves rook e1, knight f6, knight d4, king d8, rook d1, and very strong move knight d5, c4, knight f4, with advantage for black. So the better move is queen d4, knight d4, knight bd7, and if you are playing modern Philidor defense, then you know that it's position from it, but black didn't play king d8 and then king e8. They have to temples, and they can castle, so they have no problems at all. And white must to play knight f5, and the rising position is equal. Knight c5, castle queenside, bishop e6, bishop f6, g takes f6, rook a, bishop e2, rook d8. Then black can exchange their bishop on f5, and the position is absolutely drawish due to the bishops. So let's talk about the variation a, bishop f4. White controls e5 square, and here already it's an important moment, because the most popular move, bishop b4, is wrong. White plays queen d3, b6, knight g2, bishop a6, and queen e3, and white has an advantage. Black has to give up one or two bishop for knight with advantage for white. Many strong grandmaster play it in such way, but it is not a good move to play. The better move is bishop e7. Black just castles, and if knight g2, then castles, and white has to play queen d2. That transposes in the main line, and queen d3 isn't so good, because black just castles, and if castles queenside, the original white's idea, then just b5, in b1, b4, knight c2, a5, and black is the first side who started an attack. And if knight g2, then b5, a3, a5, then bishop comes to a6 with the idea of b4. So the white queen on d3 is badly placed. The better option is queen d2, but castles, knight g2, b5, and if it was a French defense with c5 pawn, black can't play in such way, but black are using the c6 pawn, and they don't need to play a6 b5, they just play b5 before a5 with an attack, a3 a5, knight g3, bishop a6, bishop d3, knight b d7. White should castle king side, but black is the side that started an attack on the queen side, so the position is unclear and need practice, but we see that black isn't worse here. So let's talk about the main continuation. In this position it is bishop a3, and it has a downside because black can play queen b6, we saw that idea already. And here white has some options. The first is to play bishop d3, but then black plays c5, e takes d5. The very old game continued. Bishop b5, bishop d7, bishop d7, knight b d7, e takes d5, e takes d5, knight g2, c4, castles, king side, bishop b4, b3, rook c8, b takes c4, Tartakover Kmoch, very old game, and here black, for some strange reason, played d takes c4, but after rook takes c4, they just have very good play on the c5, so it's an advantage for black. But e takes d4, d5 is better. Black has to play knight takes d5, it's a novelty, knight takes d5, e takes d5, d takes c5, and if you know the game of Caro-Kann against Kramnik of the candidates tournament 2014, then you must spot the move queen takes b2, because c5 pawn is a weakness now, and it is better to take the b2 pawn. Knight e2, queen a3, queen c1, bishop takes c5, bishop, queen takes a3, bishop takes a3, knight e4, and white takes the defined pawn, but the position is more or less equal. Castles, knight d5, knight a6 with an equal game. It was bishop d3, move queen takes d2 is a dubious continuation, queen takes b2, rook b1, queen a3, bishop d3. It was a woman's game, and here black should try d takes e4, f takes e4, knight g4, bishop f4, e5, d takes e5, knight d7, and something like pierce with third move c6 appears after knight f3, queen a5 with advantage for black. The other white's option is rook b1, and here the move bishop b7 is an option, but e5, knight fd7, f4, c5, it is a French defense with rook on b1, but c5 is a good move too. Bishop b5, bishop d7, bishop d7, knight b d7, it takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, it takes d5, knight e5, and here the future Grandmaster Devyatkin should play bishop b7, castles, castles, queen d2, queen c6, d takes c5, bishop c5, bishop c5, queen c5, rook f2, rook f8. Yes, black has an easy line on d5, but white has a weak square on h3, so the game is more or less equal here. And the main continuation is a3. Now, of course, queen takes b2 is just suicide due to knight a4, but d takes a4 is a good move here. In every game, white just played an awful continuation f takes a4, and it is awful due to knight g4, little tactics. Knight a4 is bad due to knight e3, knight b6, knight d1, knight a8, knight b2, and the a8 knight will be lost in some moves. And if white plays queen g4, then just queen b2 with an extra pawn. But bishop d2 looks solid, and black plays e5, very strong tactical strike. If h3, then it takes d4, knight a4, and suddenly queen c7, h take g3, h take g4, queen g3, king e2, b5, and the a4 knight is lost. So bishop e2, but h5, h3, and queen d4. It is a temporary knight sacrifice. H take g4, bishop c5 with an idea of mating the white's king. Bishop g5 an only move, queen f2, king d2 f6, queen f1, queen d4, king c1, f take g5. Black has a pair of bishops, and the coordination of white's pieces is just poor. So it is better for white to do a novelty, knight takes a4, another novelty on the 7th move. So this variation is not very popular. If black wants to play for a win, they can try bishop e7, and if they want to play on a draw, they can play knight e4, f takes e4, queen b2, knight f3, knight d7, e5, and here white has a good compensation for a pawn, so black can force a draw by playing bishop takes a3, rook b1, bishop b4, king f2, queen a3, rook a1, queen b2 with a repetition of the moves. So here is the time to draw some conclusions about this variation. After the first move, knight c3, sometimes the game transposes into the French defense. So if you don't like to play Boleslavsky variations for black, you can choose something different than my variation. But of course, white has some other options. The first of them is knight g2, and already I made a novelty on the move number 5, and the position after that move looks like the positions from the Philidor defense or Pierce defense with the third move c6 with a good position for black. The other white's option is 5 bishop g5, but it has a drawback that black can play a c5 immediately with a forced draw, as we saw. Then the variation a bishop e4 is an interesting move, because many grandmasters do and will be doing the bad continuation bishop b4, but if black just plays bishop e7 and completes the development, then they can play b5, a5, b4 with attack on the queen side. It's a new idea, so maybe we will see some Grandmasters games in this variation. And the last but not least, the continuation is 5 bishop e3. It's a standard move, but as we saw, it gave white's player just a bad position due to taking on e4 with the move knight g4. So it was the end of the fantasy variation, and I think that the best continuation for white is just to play the French defense, and if you want to have the complete repertoire, you must be ready for it. That's all about this chapter. Thank you for watching this video till the end. It was MVP. See you later.